Okay.
Goodness.
All right, we're just making sure you guys are all awake this morning. So, just as a little introduction, we know that the holiday season is really a very magical time of year. But for many people going through divorce or newly separated, dealing with custody, it can be very stressful, not only on the parents, but also on the children. Children feel it very, very much. And because the holidays resonate so deeply with kids, especially really more at a younger age, um, it's so important to have consistency and normalcy to the best of your ability. And we also know that navigating some legal hurdles while dealing with emotional strains and constraints can be very, very challenging. So we just are hoping that this presentation will help you a little bit further this year to have a much more magical experience. No matter if you're newly divorced, newly separated, or really have been doing this co-parenting thing for years. I think, and hopefully everyone can benefit from it. So let's get started. Now, whether you and your partner had religious differences during your relationship or were definitely compromising on that or different spiritual beliefs, we have found in our practice that when people separate, those differences really become magnified and the children feel those effects because people start to dig their heels in. They want their own values to dominate rather than the other parents. And many times people forget that what happened during their relationship should really still stay true after the separation, the divorce, throughout the custody differences. So really try to do your best to make sure it's normal for your children. Try to do your best to instill the same values that you had while you were under the same roof. And many times as children get older, they start to discuss with the parents what their preferences are. And that's what we do as parents. We try to provide as much opportunity for our children to really discern for themselves when they're of appropriate age, what's best for them. Because we don't want to control their lives forever. We just want to try to instill our own values, but meanwhile, giving them the freedom to be able to have their own voice, not only the freedom, but the confidence. And in order to instill that confidence in our kids, we have to let them know they're safe to do what they wish as they get older. And that safety and that feeling of security is instilled in our kids when we too feel that calmness and that serenity. And in order to do that, we have to be respectful of the other parent without reacting to whatever it is that they may want to teach. So try to continue to have these holiday celebrations and maintain the normalcy that you once did during the relationship so that they can really learn to flourish and knowing they're safe no matter what. Like the traditions of religion and spiritual growth and spirituality, it's really important to keep those family traditions in place that are more secular and non-religious, such as baking holiday cookies together, decorating your trees, and putting up, menorahs or whatever religious traditions you also observe. That it's important that the family traditions are observed and remembered and respected. If the two of you as the parents have some differences of opinion now that you're separated and living under different roofs, it's important that the children, though, can maintain the normal traditions that they were accustomed to growing up. Simply because they're living under two different, homes and two different roofs now, learning two different sets of traditions now and new values and new family situations and dynamics, it's still important for the kids to feel, once again, that safety and that security by sharing the same traditions they did. And it's super important to develop new traditions. Simply because your family looks different doesn't mean that you can't have new traditions. And it's okay that you might not be doing some of the same things, but start to develop some new traditions for your kids to find some joy and enjoyment. And oftentimes we see that parents get upset or they feel like they're missing out or they don't want their children involved with perhaps step siblings or another stepmom or dad. Just try to remember that love is infinite and love is eternal, and you want your children to feel loved and have as much love and joy in their lives as they can. So if there's another step parent in the picture and you're feeling a little insecure about it, just try to embrace the fact that you want your children loved and adored as much as possible. And it's an abundance mentality. Try not to feel like you're missing out so much. If they're in a safe environment in that other parent's home, that's all you want for them. You want them to feel safe and respected. So try to get that internally inside of yourself in order for your children to feel that externally. So we're going to be doing some scenarios now to make this more of a workshop for each of you so that you can put some of these practical tips in practice, actually. So I'm going to read the first scenario, and then I'd like you to perhaps put in the chat what you think maybe you would do. So scenario 1, and you can read along while I read it if you'd like. Jennifer and Ryan got divorced in January of this year. The divorce was very contentious, but Jennifer was determined to do what was in the best interest of their 3 children, Kate, Brad, and Simon. Although Ryan was the main source of income during their marriage, Jennifer was able to secure a successful part-time job to supplement the monthly spousal support and child support payments that she receives. Jennifer and her children live comfortably, but when the children are with Ryan, their dad, they can go on exciting adventures and they constantly receive new clothes and toys. Jennifer does not mind at all what Ryan is able to provide for the children, and she's happy when they're happy, just like I was saying before. But she does sometimes feel as though she's not able to do as much for them as Ryan does. With the holidays quickly approaching, Jennifer and Ryan are preparing to start shopping for their children. Since this is the first holiday season with separate households, Jennifer wants to make sure the children can experience the magic and joy of the season, but she's really worried she will disappoint them. How do you think Jennifer should approach this holiday season? So let's see in the chat if you all are able to. What do you think that she should do? Do you have any answers? Don't all jump at once now, guys. But we'll start responding for you. So let's bring in the slides if possible. So do you think she should work extra shifts and save more money so she can buy expensive gifts and go on a trip? Should she refuse to let Ryan know what the kids are asking so she can get the gifts herself? Should she talk to Ryan about her concerns and ask for his help? Or should she let Ryan buy all the toys? Well, really, I guess the point of all of this, everyone, is not to tell you there's a right and wrong answer, because only you know what's best for you and your children, truly. We're not here to judge. We're not here to offer the best answer. We're here to just offer support and guidance. We truly believe that children's safety and security, just like you wrote here. Thank you so much for that, Nancy. And what Jennifer wrote, creating holiday traditions with kids. It's super important. So what we suggest is that if you do have a somewhat amicable or peaceful relationship with the co-parent, you talk about it. You just are trying to be open and honest with the co-parent and show some respect, not only for yourself, but for the co-parent as well. And maybe make some suggestions. If there are large items that your children want and you can't afford it, perhaps you talk to the co-parent and say, hey, can we split this gift? And then if you split it, then you have to split that it's at both of your homes if you share custody. So it really depends on what the two of you have in place in terms of your parenting time, what the two of you are able to discuss peacefully, and if you feel safe doing that, if you feel secure, if you have boundaries in place for yourself, that you're not feeling that you are anxious in any way talking to your ex or the other co-parent about it. So it's really a personal thing, but the more you grow internally and the more confident you become, which is why so much of our classes and our workshops and our seminars are really truly around helping you be the best version of yourself so that you can show that version in front of your children and in front of their other parent. Really, that's what we're trying to do, is empower you so that you can have these discussions maturely and openly and honestly, so that there isn't those hyper, sensitive reactions, so that you are the best version of yourself. So in this situation, in our opinion, we do find that talking with the other co-parent is truly in the best interest of the children. And that really should be your primary focus always. What is in the children's best interest? So obviously doing that, we also want to make sure you're not losing yourself and your own self-respect to do it. But remember, whenever that motive is there to do what's in their best interest, by nature, you're also doing what's in your best interest because they're only an extension of you. So we're collaborating to fulfill our children's wishes. And this is exactly what we were saying in the hypothetical example we raised. It's so important to discuss gift giving expectations with your co-parent to ensure a smooth holiday season. And we know it's extremely difficult those first few years post separation or divorce with custody issues, especially extreme animosity or high emotional tension and conflict. But the more you can come to peace with those terms, and the more you can come to peace with the new version of your family dynamic, the more it's better for your children. And we all know that children at such a young age, really want to experience the joy and the magic of the holiday season. So try to consider talking to your co-parent about bringing up a budget, about the fact that we don't want to show favoritism, especially if there's a new family involved, if there are other step siblings, if there are other step parents. We don't want to show any type of favoritism. We don't want your children to feel alienated in any household, whether it's in their new, with the new step family or your family, or if there's new step siblings in each. So we just really want to be very careful to make sure your children feel warm and safe and secure. Try not to, do separate gifts. We want to make sure that in terms of the separateness of the lists, we want to make sure that there are no duplicate gifts. And just encourage your children to perhaps, give a list to each parent, and then the parents can talk about it, and the parents can talk about the budget. And they can also talk about whether they feel it's right for the children to receive certain gifts, because remember, it's the values that you're instilling, and the two parents should really try to work together so that the children still continue to grow and become the versions of them that you truly wish to raise. Wait, can you go forward? Is it moving? Okay, we have another scenario, and I'm gonna ask Samantha to read this so you can have a different voice.
Well, I'll try to do as well as Sabrina did on her first reading, so hopefully it's fun to listen to. For scenario 2, Jeremy and Carly just recently settled their divorce. They have 2 children, ages 5 and 3, and they have an equal parenting time schedule. Their divorce is amicable, and they agreed to split the holidays according to the normal court-suggested schedule without any issue. Jeremy is Jewish, and he celebrates very closely held traditions and religious practices during the holidays. Carly is not exceptionally religious, but she does celebrate Christmas alongside her family. Since the children are young, they have not experienced religious holidays with Jeremy and his family very often. Usually, the children attend Christmas festivities with Carly's family, and they saw Jeremy's family earlier or later in the week for a dinner. This year, though, according to the court suggested holiday schedule, Carly will have the children for Christmas Eve, and Jeremy will have them for Christmas Day. When she realized the schedule, Carly called Jeremy and asked if they could switch parenting time days so they could see their grandparents and extended family on Christmas Day as usual. Jeremy, however, would prefer to stick to the parenting time schedule as outlined in the judgment because he wants the children to experience Hanukkah and has already made plans for Christmas Day. What do you think Jeremy should do? So does anybody have any opinion on what maybe Carly should do?
Have any of you experienced similar situations? Deciding, maybe in the judgment, not thinking ahead that that might be a conflict on that particular day. Sometimes what we find with our clients that they come to us after a judgment has already been issued with other lawyers. And sometimes those lawyers don't think through every contingency, and it's very difficult to think through every contingency that you might experience as the children get older. But we find that truly it's important to think through things like this, dates, family traditions, education. But we have an answer here that talk through options and encourage compromise. That's true. Ask her family to celebrate on Christmas Eve to include her kids. Those are all great answers. Now, like we talked about last time, there isn't one way, there isn't one answer that is the best answer. What we find is truly how can you best handle this situation if you don't have a very cooperative co-parent, especially like in this situation. And when you try to put yourself in the other parent's shoes, you can kind of see their perspective. Look, we agreed on this. I already have plans. I want my children to celebrate Hanukkah. Or I want my children to do the things that we had already scheduled and planned for. So as a parent, especially here, we have Carly as a mom saying, look, I want my children on Christmas Day to be with their family. This is their tradition. So I can understand why there is a polarizing view to this for both sides. But we have an answer here. She can ask her family, just like one of our attendees said, she can ask her family if they can celebrate Christmas on Christmas Eve instead, or work with them to schedule a different day to celebrate. And sometimes that's what we have to have. That's what we have to do. We have to ask our extended family or our friends to say, hey, I really want to keep this tradition for my kids. Would it be possible if we celebrated on a different day? You could go to the other parent and you can ask, here, should she tell Jeremy that she is keeping the kids on Christmas Day and he can have them the next day? So really, this is an option if the parents can talk peacefully and amicably. Maybe for 1 year they do this, maybe the next year it's different. Maybe she can give up some parenting time on some other day so that Jeremy feels like he's not missing out or losing out. There's always some sort of quid pro quo that we need to really consider because we have to, again, put ourselves in the other parent's shoes and try to understand and have a little bit of sympathy for their situation too. I know that's hard, especially if you feel wronged or if you've been so hurt by them. But remember, we're doing what's in our children's best interest. So we try to discourage filing petitions or motions with the court because usually A, it's very expensive, and B, the time involved. Sometimes we can't get to court in time for the actual event, especially if you don't realize the situation until last minute. There is no time, and most courts will not be able to even have an emergency hearing on such an issue. So we really try to encourage working with the other parent, because you don't want to set that precedent that every time there's an issue, you go to court. First of all, judges and friends of the court do not like that, and they will label you as a troublemaker. Because then when the real issue arises, they're not gonna listen. It's like crying wolf. So in this instance, I try to discourage doing C unless year after year after year, the co-parent is not willing to work with you or try to accommodate your schedule, and you find that you're making all the accommodations and all the compromises, then that's not fair either. And so in D, she should adhere to the judgment and adjust her holiday plans accordingly. Obviously, D is, a last resort if you can't talk and compromise with the co-parent. But sometimes to minimize any type of animosity or acrimony, and if you don't feel secure enough within yourself to approach the co-parent and you don't feel safe enough yet to do that, and you don't want to make any waves, we find that a lot of people do just resort to item D, but we try to really encourage our clients to develop that skill. It's really a skill. Develop the skill of communication, develop the skill to be able to express yourself to your co-parent effectively, confidently, and securely enough so that you can do what's not only in the best interest of your children, but also maintaining your own boundaries and your traditions as well. Along the line of that is the effective communication. So we know that the holiday season can be stressful, even in a normal, when I saw quote unquote normal family dynamic. Nothing is really ever normal. We know that, even when parents are still together. But that being said, it does not have to be extra stressful for co-parents. When you're in a split household, many times we see co-parents being faced with an extra layer of tension and stress and anxiety that really doesn't have to be there. So really, to ensure that they go smoothly, start the conversation early. Now is a good time, and that's why we wanted to have this workshop for you prior to Thanksgiving, so that you understand that you can approach this in a more peaceful, amicable way, so that you don't have to be on pins and needles all the time, so that you can try to avoid having discussions when you're really flying off the handle in a reactionary stance rather than just sort of an adult, mature way. And if it's too scary for you to try to talk to them verbally, perhaps writing down something in an email. We find that many times when it's too hard to express yourself verbally, that writing things down in a letter or in an email in a non-confrontational way is the best way to approach it. And if you're not sure if it's confrontational, then ask an objective person, maybe not a parent or a sibling who maybe sides with you too much, but maybe someone who's a little less sided, a little less biased, someone who's a little more impartial to the whole thing, and they can maybe offer some guidance. And we're here for you to do that. We are here not only as your lawyers, but also as your counselors. We at Genesis take the term counselor and attorney at law very, very seriously. The counselor side of what we do is really truly paramount, especially with family law. So if you need that extra layer of help and support, we're here for you. And we can help you, draft those letters or those emails or the text messages to make sure that not only your children are experiencing a great holiday season, but you are too. Because we only get one chance at this. This is not a dress rehearsal. So we want to make sure your life is an amazing, magical dynamic, and it doesn't have to be so scary. Just like I dissuaded you all from doing that answer D in the prior hypothetical, we really are trying to discourage you from going to court, because when you go to court, again, it's allowing the justice system, which is not always just. So it's allowing the justice system to take part in your life and your family's life when they don't know much about your dynamic, or they don't know really anything unless you express it, and unless you have an effective lawyer to be able to parlay what's happening in your own home to a court it's really tough to leave that decision in the government's hands. Wouldn't you rather be in control of that? So that's why these co-parenting seminars are so important, because we are trying to instill in you the confidence and the courage to take your own power back, to be able to control your family's dynamic and not leave it in the hands of the courts, because that's not always going to render the best result for you and your children. So while we understand that co-parenting can be difficult, it's not always necessary to go to court. So when is court involvement necessary? Well, we like to say that if there's abuse of any kind, if there is such a huge disparity of behavior, if the dynamic is so truly unfair and the other parent refuses to cooperate or be any type of decent co-parent, well, then perhaps legal action is definitely necessary. You know, we would be out of a job if we didn't have to go to court often. So we understand that court intervention is very, very necessary. But after you've done your judgment and you have your custody in place and you know the trajectory of your family dynamic, it's super important to try to gain that control back. But if there continues to be any type of violation of any judgment or order, or someone is not doing what they're supposed to be doing for the best interest of your children, then definitely go back to court. We definitely always encourage you to maintain journals, to maintain diaries, to make sure you have enough evidence when going back to court, so that again, you're not crying wolf, like I mentioned in the prior slide of this workshop, but so that you have enough evidence to establish that there should be a show cause, which means that the other side isn't doing what they're doing, that there should be a motion to enforce the judgment or a motion to enforce the order. We need to have that evidence so that you can clearly and concisely convey to your lawyer, and so that the lawyer can convey to the court what the co-parent isn't doing. For instance, if they're not following the holiday schedule, if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing for the holidays, for the vacation schedule, if they're not providing you the passport that they should, if they're taking too much time and not giving you Christmas Day as planned, or Christmas Eve, or letting you celebrate with your family, if you find that you're doing all the compromising, that you're giving the children to them when they want their family traditions, but they're not doing the same, then yes, legal action may be necessary so that you still have a voice and you can do as you traditionally have always done, especially around the holidays. And scenario 3, I'm going to be leaving for Alicia to read.
So scenario 3, we're talking about Summer and Adam. So Summer and Adam have been dating for 6 years and they have a 2-year-old daughter together. Recently, they decided that it would be best for them and their daughter for them to stop their romantic relationship. Although Adam believed that they would be able to work together to raise their daughter as co-parents, like so many of us do, he quickly realized that Summer did not agree with him. Since he wants to continue being a constant part of his daughter's life, Adam retained an attorney to file a custody action and establish paternity and parenting time. When she received notification of the court case, Summer became extremely difficult to talk to. She started refusing to allow Adam to see their daughter unless the court made her, and she's not willing to speak with Adam's attorney about potential settlement before trial. With the holidays quickly approaching, Adam is nervous that Summer will block him from seeing his daughter for the holidays. And it's very important to Adam that his daughter be able to participate in the holiday traditions that she is used to. What do you think Adam should do? Please take a moment to put what you think Adam should do in the chat. We'll go over your answers and Sabrina will read the answers that we have.
So anybody have some ideas of what you think Adam should do? Okay, well, again, don't all jump at once. You guys can show your faces. I'm sure they're amazing faces this fine morning in November. But if you choose to just to remain quiet, I'm happy to go through the various scenarios. So we continue to, again, try to bring about peace and harmony, because really truly that's what's in your children's best interest. And some people say, well, if we had peace and harmony, we wouldn't be having two different households for the kids, right? But at some point, you do have to put aside, or should put aside, your differences. If we held on to all that resentment and bitterness and, all of that animosity, it only hurts us and our children in the long run. At some point, you're gonna have to learn to either forget or forgive and move on, or just compartmentalize it for a while so that you can just do what's in the best interest for your children. So here we have one that, should he talk to his attorney, or ask his attorney to talk to Summer about the holidays and work with her to decide what will happen while the case is pending? Should he stick to the current agreement and work with his family to celebrate with his daughter during his court-ordered time? Should he ask his attorney to file a motion requesting a holiday parenting time schedule be established right away? Or should he keep his daughter for the holidays and let Summer be the one to file a motion with the court? What do you guys think? Did you have any kind of answer? If mother is unwilling to cooperate, yeah, it is a difficult one. So temporary orders are a definite requirement, especially if one of the parents is being extremely difficult. And it is an unfortunate situation. And, sometimes people feel very misled, or they feel that it's a bait and switch. We have many now high conflict cases where the parents once thought that it was going to be an amicable situation, similar to Summer and Adam's scenario. And it's very unfortunate when a person doesn't maintain their word, and you think you have an agreement with someone, and then the rug is pulled out from under you. And unfortunately, that happens a lot with marriages. That happens a lot in relationships. We all know people that change. We all know people that change their minds. So in this situation, if Summer isn't willing to work with Adam, then Adam may not have a choice but to get his lawyer involved and to try to work it out with Summer. So the lawyer can talk to Summer, and if Summer lawyers up and gets her own attorney, then perhaps they need to work out some resolution. Maybe they can work out a resolution prior to having to file a petition or a motion in court. But here, Adam may not have a choice. He may have to do what's in the best interest of his children, and that is going to court and getting some resolution if Summer continues to be adamant that she doesn't want to talk. And he is the parent, and unfortunately, it's not right and it's not fair, but many times we see parents trying to block the other parent from participating in that child's life, and that's not right. And so we often try to instill in our clients, while it might not be always what you want, you always have to look to do the right thing. So Summer, in my opinion, needs to get, some more maturity in her, and maybe her lawyer can coach her. And not all lawyers will do this. Not all lawyers will try to coach and counsel their client to be the best version of themselves, which means to do the right thing. Not all lawyers do that. As we know, we have lawyers that inflame the issues, they inflate the cases, and unfortunately, what they fail to realize is that the only people that suffer are the parties and the children. Because once that divorce or that custody battle is over, these two people have to deal with each other for the rest of their lives, essentially, because the children will grow older and they'll always be a part of that family dynamic at some level. And unless you want to give up your rights altogether, which the majority of people do not, it's unfortunate when we see lawyers try to inflame the issues, because again, the only people that lose are the children and the parties. And that's a lot to give up, because we want to try to encourage the growth long after the divorce is over, long after the custody battle ends. And we want to encourage you to live your best lives for the rest of your life. And if you have a lawyer that really tries to fight, you might want to reconsider that, because you really truly need to understand. But again, I'm gonna put a pause in that. Again, if you have an issue, like we talked about before, of high conflict, of abuse, of any type of situation that you should not tolerate, don't tolerate it. We're not telling you tolerate intolerable situations or behavior. But we're just trying to get you to understand that sometimes being more reasonable will truly get you farther along well after the ending of your custody battle. So really, that's all we have in terms of our slideshow. We really know that successful holiday co-parenting truly requires open communication and respect and a commitment to doing what's in the best interests for our children. We know that that's been the theme here all along, and we really hope that you have gained and garnered some wisdom from some of our tips and tricks today. We're gonna go through now some questions and answers from our chat group, as well as some of the questions that were raised prior to this in our RSVPs. And we're definitely happy to answer anything, like I said, today for you. And we're not gonna be able to give you much legal advice, but we want to give you some practical guidance to help you navigate these waters here that can be sometimes tricky. So one of our first questions is, how do you establish a holiday rotation schedule? How can you do that effectively? So the holiday rotation schedule can sometimes be done while the divorce or custody battle is pending. Like we talked about before with one of our sample questions. Sometimes it can be done at, during the negotiations of the judgment. If you're going through a divorce or a custody battle during a holiday season, it's very important that you establish it in the interim, right? But we often find that while you're doing it during the divorce, it sets a precedent for what's going to happen post-judgment. So to establish an effective holiday rotation or holiday schedule, you want to look at, like we talked about before, the traditions of each of your family members, the traditions of your religion, if you have a religious affiliation. If your children are used to doing certain things during the holidays, if they're used to seeing their cousins, if they're used to seeing their grandparents, if they're used to seeing extended family or their friends, it's very important to continue that for your children's normalcy and for their safety and security. And it's important to continue that after the separation and after the custody is over, the custody is determined. So talk with your lawyer, talk with your co-parent, decide how you want to see it. Many times we find that it flip-flops from year to year. Sometimes, depending on the religious affiliation, we find that one of the parents does Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and the other does a different, holiday schedule. And many times it's, it really just depends on the two people and the traditions that you two have followed during their young lives up until this point. So it's really a case by case basis. It's not a one size fits all type of an answer. But we really try to encourage that communication and think ahead of what you may want to see down the road, especially as your children get older. We don't want to just limit ourselves to the now. Sometimes we definitely need to focus more on the future. How do you want to see the holidays being treated, 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, especially if you have younger kids now? So that's very important to really take some time with yourself, write down some thoughts, express that to your lawyer, and then the two of you can come up with a holiday plan, a holiday schedule moving forward.
So we do have another question that was submitted beforehand. But before we get on to that, does anybody have any questions we might be able to answer that you'd be comfortable typing in the chat or unmuting yourself to talk about? Okay. Well, if you think of something, just go ahead and feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat and we'll be more than happy to talk with you. One of the questions that was submitted to us prior to the workshop was, what should I do if my kids don't want to spend the holidays with my ex? So this is it's a really complicated question, and I think Sabrina and I can agree that we see this question come up a lot, and it comes up not only during the holidays, but maybe when you're negotiating a parenting time schedule because kids are uncomfortable with change. And it's really important, and I know Sabrina has told us all throughout many of the workshops, and she's mentioned it today. It's really important to focus on the comfortability of the children. We need to do what we can to encourage them to spend time with mom and dad. To encourage them that just because mom and dad might not be getting along, or just because mom and dad have lived in separate houses, doesn't mean that mom or dad love the child any less. It's so important to instill in your children, especially during the holidays, how grateful we are to have such a large family, a large system. And if they're lucky enough to have another portion of family, perhaps a stepmom or stepdad or step siblings, if they're lucky enough to have that in their lives, then we need to encourage them to embrace it, because the more people that can love our children, the better. Now, the caveat to this is if there is a situation where your child is uncomfortable going to mom or dad's because they don't feel safe, or they feel as though they're not being treated properly, then you need to have a further discussion with your co-parent and find out what's really going on. How can you help your child? If it's impossible to have that conversation, or if you are being made aware of some unsafe situations that your children are in, then you need to contact an attorney and find out what you can do to help protect your child, and it might be time to go to court.
Does anybody have any comments? And thank you, Sam, that was a great answer.
Thank you.
Again, it's a case by case basis, but as Sam mentioned, you should really try to encourage your child to, love that other parent. That's one of the best interest factors. We look to make sure that each parent is encouraging and fostering a good relationship with the other parent. As hard as that may be to put your differences aside, as hard as that may be to really get outside of yourself, it's very important for the well-being of the children, because remember, they're an extension of that other parent. And if you show any type of disdain for that other parent, on a subconscious level, you're showing disdain for your child, and they feel that. And, Maya Angelou has a quote basically that says that nobody really remembers what somebody said, nobody really remembers what somebody did, but everyone usually remembers how that person made you feel. And I always like to say this with our clients, because it doesn't matter sometimes, sometimes people get caught up in the quantity of things, like how much time I'm spending, or how much time they're spending over there, or how much time they're spending over here. And it has less to do with the quantity and more to do with the quality. Your children will always want to be with you if you make them feel safe, secure, heard. And don't be afraid to be the one parent that is the one instilling these, values, or making sure they're brushing their teeth or going to bed or doing their homework. It's that consistency. Children need to be around that discipline. There's so many studies that show that children thrive in an environment where there is that consistency and the discipline. So if you find that the other parent might be the fun parent and you're the one doing the hard work, that's okay, just as long as your children feel safe and secure in your presence. And that safetiness comes from your being secure and safe within yourself. So instead of being angry that your child wants to spend Christmas or the holidays with their other parent, instill that it's okay, because you're safe and secure within yourself. Your children aren't going anywhere. They're still going to be with you. It just might be for that day. They're going to be somewhere else. And that's okay, because your children will return to you and they'll be happier because they have so much more love and enrichment in their life.
Okay. Speaking of your children returning to you, Sabrina, we actually do have a question in the online chat, and someone wants to know how to navigate travel during the holidays. And so when we talk about holiday travel, I know people have a lot of plans that they like to do, family vacations and things like that. But when you're going through the divorce process, and when mom decides that she wants to maybe take the kids to Florida for Christmas to go see the grandparents, and dad doesn't want to let the kids go, how do we handle these kinds of situations? How do we keep the travel aspect if we can?
So, travel is a big issue, and oftentimes we get out of the country travel involved. And with that, it is very important to establish an order with the court allowing for that. And sometimes we have clients that want to take their children to countries that are not a party to the Hague Convention. And I know I'm talking a little bit of a legal term, but if a client desires that, or if their ex-spouse or the ex-partner wants to travel with the children, in order to protect your child, you have to put some boundaries in place, such as, you know, the location, the whereabouts, the how, the who, the what, the when, the why, the where, all of those things need to be established in order for that parent staying home to feel safe to allow their child to travel with the other parent, so they don't feel that they're going to be absconding with their child, keeping them in another country. And especially if it's not a party to the Hague Convention, because then the United States, we don't have any recourse to get that child back. So it's very important to make sure you have these procedures in place prior to any type of travel of that nature. Now, if it's more of a domestic nature, if it's more of a traveling to grandma's house for the holiday, you know, just make sure that you are respecting the other parents' parenting time for the holidays, and you are as well, and they are for you as well. So if it's a holiday tradition for the children to spend, you know, Christmas morning waking up at their grandmothers or their grandfathers or their cousins, or if it's a tradition to stay home with you, but the other parent wants to travel, make sure you decide that ahead of time. Make sure that you're following the terms of the judgment. And again, a good judgment will have these parameters in place. A good judgment will speak to what each party is allowed to do with their child or children during their parenting time. So travel is allowed and encouraged if it is followed and if it is done according to the terms that the two of you have agreed upon prior to. And if you haven't done the, you know, requisite thoughts already or the pre-planning, then talk to your co-parent, you know, say, hey, I know this isn't in our judgment, but I would really like it if I could take the children to the Niagara Falls for the holidays, or whatever it is that you want to do. So again, talk with your children. Talk with your children's co-parent. And also even your children, talk with them as they get older. They have more of a voice as well. And maybe they don't want to go anywhere. Maybe they want to stay home. Maybe it's super important for them to wake up in their own bed on Christmas morning. Whatever it is that you agree on, just make sure you communicate effectively with the other co-parent.
Hey Sabrina, it looks like we do have a question in the chat from Tyra. Tyra, are you comfortable unmuting yourself to talk with Sabrina, or would you prefer I read from the chat?
Well, I think we should read it.
All right, sounds good.
Would you like me to read it, or? do you
So
want me to
I'm happy to,
Okay.
Sabrina. So Tyra says, my agreement was written that mother has the first half of Christmas and father has the other half. Does that mean the father will have the child every New Year's Eve and New Year's Day? When they were working on the detail of the holidays, his lawyer didn't want to change anything he wrote. The father said, don't worry, I don't worry, I don't care about the Christmas holidays. We will work this out. And they can do makeup time if she'd like to have the child traveling during the holidays. After the settlement was signed, the father changed his word and said that he has their daughter for every New Year's, which was written on the paper. So he's going to exercise every New Year's. They alternate fall and winter break. But she wants to know if she's going to have the child for New Year's during winter break, even though the judgment seems to be unclear.
So Tyra, this is one of those situations. Thank you so much for that question. And this happens so often. And we touched upon it earlier in this workshop, where just like one of our hypothetical questions, our samples where, you know, someone changed your mind, you know, and it's very unfortunate because you want to be able to trust when someone says, don't worry, we'll do work on this on our own. I don't want to incur any more legal fees. We can figure this out. And then they don't. And then you're left holding the bag. You're left suffering because you trusted that other parent to do the right thing. My suggestion here, Tyra, would be to have a lawyer review your judgment, to have a lawyer look into this, because it's not fair that he gets them every year on that holiday and you want them and you can switch and you can even tell your lawyer, look, he promised we could switch back and forth, but every jurisdiction in our great nation speaks through their orders. The courts speak through their orders. The only thing that matters is what's written down on paper that the judge signs off on. That is an order of the court, whether it's a family law judge or a regular judge. If it is not agreed upon and given the stamp of approval by the judge, then it's not binding. So once something is signed and executed and entered into court, it is very, very, very difficult to change that judgment without considerable evidence and circumstances showing that it should be changed. So Tyra, my recommendation would be to make sure you keep a journal of all the times that he's not doing what he said he was going to do, even if it's in the judgment that he's not violating anything, that if you two had an agreement and he's now going back on his word, you write it down because that's the information your lawyer is going to need to bring your case forward. If he said, don't worry, I don't celebrate these holidays, you can have them or we can alternate, and he doesn't do what he said he was going to do, the only recourse you have is making sure that you have enough evidence to bring forward so that that can be changed in the judgment. But my recommendation moving forward is for any one of you listening out there, do not enter any order or try to get anything signed if you do not 100% agree with the terms. Do not sign anything, do not have a judge enter anything unless it's for sure 100% what you want. Because once it's entered with the court in any jurisdiction in this nation, like I said, it is extremely difficult to change it. Courts speak through their orders, period. I hope that helps. And yeah, it's hard. It's hard when you trust someone and, we should know better, and there's a saying that no good deed goes unpunished. We try to do the right thing and then the other party isn't. But don't change who you are. Just be always that person, but just get a little more discerning of who you can do that to. Don't always open your heart and be so trusting of everyone, especially if you had a relationship with someone that you learned that you can't trust anymore. Then you think logically, well, how can I trust this person, to say and do as they say they're going to do if they didn't do it during the course of our relationship? So, we all learn from experience. We've all been burned. We all know that sometimes we just keep trusting and trusting until we learn that lesson. But don't change who you are. Just get more discerning and just be more trusting of the people that truly do deserve to be trusted. And that trust has to be earned. In the same way, your children are learning to trust you and trust their dad or mom again, because the divorce or the custody battle really disrupted their trust too. So we all are trying to rebuild that trust. And in order to do that, you first have to start trusting yourself, trusting that you know what you're doing is right for them and by them, trusting that you know what to do. And that trust within yourself can only be earned little by little by little. And every time you exercise that muscle, that confidence will grow and you will know how to really truly behave in the best interest of your children and for yourself as well. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm so happy you joined us today. We really want this co-parenting journey of yours to be the best that you can experience. This holiday season is soon approaching. It's quickly coming upon us, faster than we ever really thought, but it's already here. And we hope that you call us if you need any advice, if you need any counseling. We're here to help you. I offer lots of personal counseling outside of the legal realm. I'm happy to do that for each and every one of you. If you so like, you can contact me anytime at s.cronin@Genesis Legal Group. And any one of our fine attorneys here at Genesis Legal Group can help you navigate any of these waters, whether it's going to court or negotiating. We're always here for you. And we're so happy that you joined us today. Thank you all so much and happy holidays. from the bottom of our hearts and from our family to yours. Happy holidays.